Yeah.
Is this urban legend, or is there any truth to this, that you wanted to draft Kevin Garnett
Mm-hmm.
in Toronto,
Yep.
put him in the middle, and put 4 guards around him?
Absolutely. So let me tell
Break
you.
that down.
Let me tell you what ended up happening, and then I'll break it down. So I'm gonna remind you of a guy by the name of Marcus Camby that I had, a brother that you love by the name of Doug Christie, one that I drafted by the name of Tracy McGrady, a little point guard that was Rookie of the Year by the name of Damon Stoudemire, and then number 15, Vince Carter.
That's me.
Them was the guys. Okay? Now, the idea that I had, and Jim Kelly right now, who's with the Dallas Mavericks, and Bob Zeffalato, whose son Scott Zeffalato runs the Hall of Fame. I brought those two gentlemen in, and what I want to do in Toronto, we called it the Raptor 2. And what was the Raptor 2? The Raptor 2 was going to be a 6'7" to 6'9" power forward who had guard skills. Because if you remember offense back then, the 4 always pinned down on the 2. So we wanted to be able to switch the 4 and the 2. But we wanted on the offensive end that guard, that 4, who would have been McGrady or Carter, whatever, they would have guard skills.
Gotta break it down.
And now they can break it down. They can shoot the 3. They can get to the basket. Guys like Oakley couldn't guard them on the perimeter. Had Damon Stoudemire, who could play high screen and roll with Marcus Camby, who could, pass, shoot to the. Now, when I saw Kevin Garnett, first time I saw him was in South Carolina at a playground. He didn't even know I was there. He was playing outside, and they had this little playground tournament. So I snuck down there, and I'm watching this dude. Yeah. Between the legs, behind the back, pulling up, shooting, passing, diming. And I'm like, that's my Raptor 2. That's who I want. That's who.
Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope Podcast. I'm back with another podcast about sports. And of course, I'm talking about the NBA. As you can tell from the audio clip that just played, Isaiah Thomas was, of course, the first GM or general manager of the Toronto Raptors back when they first got started. And he was talking about potentially drafting Kevin Garnett. And of course, Kevin Garnett had some question marks about him coming into the draft because, for one, he was a high school student, getting drafted out of high school. And then he had some off the court issues, so to speak. So a lot of people were kind of hesitant on him. Probably the reason why he didn't go number 1, and he was young as well. So there wasn't a lot of data for high school players back then. Of course, you had like Moses Malone and a few others, but for the most part, he was one of the first players to come out of high school to actually be productive and show that this thing could work. You can't do it now, but back then, after him, you had the Kobe's and the LeBrons and the T-Macs and people like that. But for the most part, he was one of the first ones that actually broke through as a directly out of high school player. But Isaiah Thomas still, even with those reservations and those question marks, said he would have taken him. He told the other GMs, like, hey, just between me and you, if you don't take this guy, we're going to draft him because we know he's the future. And he turned out to be that, this great leader and team contributor, and just his tenacity and his leadership is just unmatched. So he became this prolific player, one of the greatest power forwards of all time, behind, of course, only behind really like a Tim Duncan and maybe a few others, but he's definitely top 3 power forwards in the NBA of all time. And he ended up going 5th to the Timberwolves and changed the course of their history. But a lot of things that Isaiah said was very interesting to me, just for the simple fact of just being able to see the forest through the trees and being able to be so a visionary, because he's not really known as a GM now. He's more of an analyst now and a pundit and things like that. But as far as him as a GM, if he would have got Kevin Garnett, that might have changed the future of the Toronto Raptors. Because I don't know if they would have been able to get a Vince Carter back, in the future, or be able to get a T Mac or Chris Bosh eventually, because they would have been very efficient, with the pieces they would have been able to put around them. So I don't know. The future of Toronto would be different if they would have, received Kevin Garnett. But of course, for just giving a hypothesis or just fantasizing about the team that they could have or could have had, um, with Vince Carter and with a T Mac, that would have been life changing because that would have been 3 Hall of Famers similar to what he had in Boston Celtics. Um, that would have been phenomenal, and the box office rate that they would have had, the amount of money that would have been spread out throughout the team and throughout the country or the city of Toronto, I should say, would have been phenomenal for that franchise, and it would have definitely changed. They eventually got NBA championship when they got Kawhi Leonard, and they had to put the pieces around him, but he left after that year of winning the championship and only stayed 1 year. Then you get DeRozan and all these other pieces later on. But to have Vince Carter and to have Tracy McGrady and to have Kevin Garnett, it would have been great defense and great offensive play. You would have had 3 All-Stars and definitely 3 Hall of Famers, but that team would have been tremendously different. The franchise would have been tremendously different. It would have probably been up there with the Golden States of their era, so to speak, because back then, you didn't need three-point shooters. You just needed mid-range shooters, which they had great mid-range and Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter, and definitely the post game and mid range from Kevin Garnett, especially as a big man. But I think they would have definitely been a top 2, 3 team every year in the East, especially in the East, when there was a lot of parity because you had to deal with the 76ers and you had to deal with the Magic when they had Shaq and things like that. But I think they would have been better than most teams out East for sure. Out of West, they would just have to deal with the Lakers, and there was a lot more parity in the West back then, opposed to where it is today. But nevertheless, I think um, having that amount of talent and having that much promise, I don't know if those stars would have been more elite than they are today because they all went separate paths. Because Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter played on the same team together, but eventually, Vince Carter stayed and Tracy McGrady ended up going to Houston and becoming this big name and was able to do so many different things in so many different locations. But he was a 30-point. You can pretty much pencil him in from 25 to 30 points a night. And same thing with Vince Carter in that miraculous 51-point, I believe, game he put up against the 76ers and Allen Iverson. But he was a solo star, and then Tracy McGrady was a solo star. And when they played together in Toronto, they were a lot younger, and they were trying to still figure it out. They didn't know what they were. Of course, they were both in the dunk competition together in that 2000 one, which is one of the best dunk competitions of all time. But we knew these guys were athletic, but we didn't know these guys could be forces within the league as far as scoring and being able to be so creative on the court, which they were. So I don't know if they would have, when they would have linked up with a Kevin Garnett, if we would have saw all this immense talent. It's the same situation with OKC. You had Russell Westbrook and you had a Kevin Durant, and then you had um, James Harden and you had Serge Ibaka. Now these guys were pretty good together, but once they split apart, you start seeing things look different. When James Harden left first and he went to Houston, he became this 30-point a night scorer, this prolific scorer, one of the best we've ever seen. And then when Kevin Durant left, he went to Golden State, won 2 back-to-back um, NBA championships and became MVP and did all these great things. But then Russell Westbrook, being left in OKC by himself, was able to be the triple-double king, do it back-to-back consecutively, win an MVP. It's because he had that solo starlight. But when you put all these pieces together, sometimes you don't get that. It's very rare that you can get that. Shea Alexander was able to do that in OKC without it, but he really doesn't have stars around him. Or maybe he does, but they're kind of getting watered down playing with so much talent. So you never know until they split apart. So that's the most important thing I think that I got from what Isaiah Thomas was conveying to on the All the Smoke podcast. is that, the talent that he would have been able to get, received with Kevin Garnett. Of course, he would have had to put the requisite pieces around him, but I don't know if you've been able to get a Vince Carter and you were able to get a Tracy McGrady. Because Tracy McGrady came, he was straight out of high school as well. Vince Carter played in North Carolina. So, maybe if their draft stock plummeted somehow, you would have been able to get him. But for the most part, you're probably not getting him with a player like Kevin Garnett because he's a franchise changer, centerpiece. Even though in Minnesota he was never able to get out the first round, but he was getting them to the playoffs in a very competitive West when you had to see, Shaq and Kobe, and you had to see the Kings when they were good, and they had all these different teams. You had Seattle out there, and you had so many different pieces. So, um, tell me what your thoughts about Kevin Garnett possibly, being drafted to the Toronto Raptors back in the day. And until next time, I'll see you next time.